This is an overview of Activity 610. It will provide a background to the activity and give you an idea of what's important to your community to document in regard to meeting the activity's basic credit criteria and to provide examples of credible sub-elements. I must point out that you, as the CRS coordinator for your community, must involve your emergency management staff. I can't emphasize that enough. After all, the 600 series of activities are the only CRS activities which are focused on the community's emergency management program. These are the only life safety evaluations by CRS. The single most important tool that I have in this endeavor is the documentation checklist, which is provided to you by your CRS ISO specialist. It is provided to both assist me in evaluating your emergency management flood warning program and to also provide to you a tool in your toolbox to assess your emergency management program as it relates to those same flood warning programs. Activity 610 is focused on the principle that an ample warning combined with a flood response plan can prevent loss of life and property damage. This is the only series of activities that look at life safety, as I said previously. In the case of flood warning and response, communities use a flood threat recognition system as the basis of warning. The ability to receive notifications on a 24/7 basis is crucial in this endeavor. These systems vary in their level of sophistication, generally based on community vulnerabilities and budgetary constraints. Activity 610 has divided these systems into levels 1, 2, and 3. These levels are described in the CRS Coordinator's Manual on pages 610-5 and 610-6. For example, the best FTR system is considered to be a level 3 system, which is worth 75 points. This system can use Doppler radar, real-time data, storm, forecast track modeling, and satellite imagery to provide sufficient early warning. Alert system or iFlow's precipitation gauges, river gauges, and tidal gauges are used to provide everything from flash flood warnings to the timing of potential flood level crests and storm surge heights. For this data, flood inundation and storm surge areas can be developed and mapped. This ties FTR and FRO together. These technologies are or can be combined with GIS products to provide addressing and individual notifications via text, email, or voice calls directly to citizen subscribers with emergency warning information. This ties FTR with EWD. These FTR systems, combined with community comprehensive emergency management plans, flood response plans, emergency operation plans, hazard mitigation plans with associated maps, enables emergency warning dissemination to the public and to critical facilities. These actions are part of the normal emergency management mission cycle. All are links in the circle. Without them all, you have a broken program. This slide is a synopsis of Activity 610 in regard to how we evaluate your community's emergency management program by looking at the flood threat recognition system, early warning dissemination, flood response, FRO, critical facility planning, and we also recognize the National Weather Service's Storm Ready Community and Tsunami Ready Community programs. Of the 22,000 plus NFIP member communities in the U.S., 1,416 are also members of the Community Rating System, which equates to approximately two-thirds of the flood insurance policies sold through the National Flood Insurance Program. These policies are subsidized by the premiums paid by the non-CRS policyholders. As I have previously mentioned, Activity 610 evaluates those measures that protect life and property during a flood through flood warning and response programs. Its 4 sub-elements of FTR, EWD, FRO, and CFP are tied together in order to emulate your community's emergency management program. An added benefit of pursuing 610 credit is that it encourages the community's emergency management staff to review its flood warning program in regard to development and documentation of its entire scope of flood warning capabilities. Emergency management's daily mission is best described by these 5 phases: prevention, preparedness, response, recovery, and mitigation. By now you should be thinking, who is my emergency manager? Or if you are the emergency manager, I guess I should be coordinating our Activity 610 credit. At the time of this recording, the Coordinator's Manual is dated 2013. However, by the time you listen to this recording, it should be the 2017 manual that we're discussing. So I have a few slides that's following this slide, showing the differences between the two manuals and the sub-elements. In the activity's first sub-element, FTR, Flood Threat Recognition, there is a checklist that it has all of these different sub-elements that you should be following along with if possible. If not, feel free to download it and then restart the YouTube video. What we're looking at is to complete the documentation checklist for the tech reviewer, that's myself. We're going to look at your community's flood hazard description. Generally, you can find that in a hazard mitigation plan, community's flood inundation map, which we'll discuss at length later, a copy of the adopted flood warning response plan, whatever it's called in your community. It must be marked up indicating where you can find these possible points, a description of the flood threat recognition system in your community. Remember, we discussed earlier level 1, 2, or 3 system, a copy of the maintenance procedures for any gauges that your community may actually own, in other words, not a USGS gauge or some similarly federally owned gauge, an impact adjustment map showing the number of buildings that are found within your special flood hazard area. You can give me the raw numbers, the numbers of those buildings or more buildings that are affected by your FTR, your FRO, EWD programs, a copy of all the outreach materials which your ISO CRS specialist will actually evaluate, and a description of a flood exercise, be it an after-action review or a lessons learned report, or it could be an activation of your Emergency Operations Center within the last 12 months. This is the first slide where I compare the 2013 and the 2017 manual sub-elements. This being FTR, you can see neither sub-element changed in either the 2013 or the 17 manual. Level 1 is still worth 25 points, Level 2 50, and Level 3 75 points. The second sub-element, EWD, or Emergency Warning Dissemination, on the checklist you must show a copy of the adopted flood warning response plan, whatever it's called, copy of the outreach materials credited under EWD, a copy of your pre-scripted messages. This is very important. This is part of the emergency management focus on having pre-scripted messages for things such as your call-out message on, say, a Code Red or Everbridge system or your emergency alert system. You should have a map indicating the siren locations in your community and their coverage area, usually shown in a circumference diagram. A description of your publicly owned call system, whatever that may be, with a contract with that provider. A copy of a cable agreement or override procedures, or if you own your own cable television station, indications that you do use that for your emergency warning dissemination. Description of other flood or other forms of public notification. This could be electronic signs that are used on the highway, your social media reports, being Facebook, Twitter, anything like that. And then the description of flood exercise and AAR, which is after action review or report, and lessons learned. On this slide, we're talking about EWD 1 through 5, or at least a portion of 5. The only difference between the 2013 manual and the 2017 manual is found on EWD 3, as in the 17 manual has added the words that covers the community's jurisdiction. So if an outdoor voice system is used or fixed siren system, it must cover the community's jurisdiction. On this slide, EWD 6 did not change. However, 7, 8, 9, and 10 did change. This was done due to the result of a focus group put together from CRS task force members of emergency managers and other local officials who recommended there be a shifting or a redistribution of points in EWD. Depicted here are scenes from the Baton Rouge, Louisiana flooding of August 2016. You can see people curled up on their roofs. They had very massive, fast flooding, and they were not warned, or perhaps they just didn't have the capability to receive a warning. So early warning to possibly impacted areas can avoid or prevent these types of situations. Sub-element flood response operations. You should provide either a URL or a hard copy of your flood warning response plan, once again marked up, copies of any documents that you want credited under FRO if they're not in that flood warning plan. And once again, you see the description of a flood exercise and AAR. Keep in mind that you only need one exercise or one activation for Activity 610, not a separate one for each sub-element. Changes shown in FRO sub-elements, primarily in FRO 2 and 3, as you can see by looking at the slide between the 2013 and 2017 manual, FRO 2 changed in points and description, as did FRO 3. You can see a very massive change in wording and point redistribution. This was done due to a result of the focus group by emergency managers. FRO 5 through 7, there were major changes in that there was the elimination of FRO 7 in the 2017 manual. Also in 5, you had a change in points and description, as you can see on the slide. And in 6, change in points and description. So the overall points in FRO did not change. Once again, it was just a redistribution to make it more in line with what's actually found in the field or in the community. As part of the basic credit criteria of Activity 610, you must, as a riverine type community, in other words non-coastal, have a map that depicts at least 3 separate levels of flood inundation. These flood inundation maps are not flood insurance rate maps, which are produced by FEMA solely for the purpose of rating flood insurance policies. As you can see here, there are 5 separate levels depicted. So in this community, the Emergency Operations Plan not only contains the maps, but also has tasks and missions and standards for each different level depicted by the maps. This addresses the minimum credit criteria. Under sub-element Critical Facilities Planning, which is part of your EOP or CEMP plan, you must complete the documentation checklist showing a list of all public and private critical facilities that can be affected by flooding. In the old manual, it was those just found within the special flood hazard area. That is not the case. They must also show the contact information for those facilities, being the person's name. You can have emails, you can have phone numbers, and any agreed upon warning needs that that facility may have. A list of critical facilities have developed their own flood warning response plans. These must be reviewed or accepted by the community emergency management staff in order to incorporate that into their plans and operations. And a sample page from the latest list of critical facilities. For those of you who may have concerns about HIPAA violations, as the technical reviewer, I am part of FEMA or considered to be part of FEMA. It goes to no public outreach, no public disclosure. So you can submit that to us, or if you'd like, just redact certain sections such as people's names. There were no changes in CFP 1 and 2 credit, description, or definitions between the 2013 and the 2017 manuals. Depicted here is the Livingston Parish 911 Dispatch Center. As you can tell, the floor is wet. I don't know if this facility is actually located in the 100 or the 500-year floodplain. However, it does show that the location of a critical facility in a flood-prone area is not a good idea. It should be part of your critical facilities planning that this facility have an early notification that the flood is coming, and they have a plan for evacuation. Now let's look at the 6 credit criteria for 610. During my tech reviews, if the community does not meet one of the criteria listed on the next 3 slides, then 0 credit will be assigned to that review, regardless of any possible points in any of the sub-elements that could be assigned. Also, the storm-ready community or tsunami-ready community credit cannot be assigned in a vacuum. In other words, you can't just receive SRC points and nothing else. The community must have a description of its flood hazard. That includes the 2 bullets you see here. They're continued from the previous slide. Also, your local government probably already has various plans or risk assessments that meet this criterion. If not, it's recommended that the community complete the CRS Community Self-Assessment described in Section 240 of the Coordinator's Manual. As I mentioned earlier, the flood inundation map must show various levels. It could be a paper product, such as shown on this slide, or it could be an electronic that you send in on a flash drive or CD, or just a URL to your website, which is preferable. Remember, the FEMA-developed firm is not considered to be a flood inundation map. It is an insurance rating map only. There were major changes in the 2017 manual in reference to Credit Criteria 3, where it describes the type of maps that are acceptable. We've now incorporated flash flood areas, which are called impact area maps, into the list of acceptable maps, and we discussed large counties with primarily A-zone mapping, which is a big point of concern for those counties, especially out west, say in Arizona, who could not come up with very detailed maps for a county that encompassed over 2,000 square miles. Here's an example of an illustrative flood map showing different flood levels. This one showing 4 flood levels, both by color and a description, saying inundation area L2, 3, 4, and different depths such as 13 feet at the gauge. This is an excellent example of a multi-level flood inundation map which can be used for the credit criteria of Activity 610. An excellent example of an internet-based map being the Susquehanna Inundation Mapping Viewer. You can see from the overall website that the different locations that you can look at and get very detailed information. As we drill down to Shikshini, New York, you can see the different flood stage levels which are depicted on the map. Also, they will be addressed in their flood warning program. Your flood inundation map could be a completely digital or a web-based product as shown here. This is St. Charles Parish, Louisiana. They have 13 different flood level inundations shown with various depths assigned to those elevations. This is a screen capture of the Fort Collins Flood Warning System. As an example of their flash flood impact area map, that's because they're primarily concerned with flash floods and not your classic riverine flooding situation. A major player in your flood threat recognition system could be the USGS, as shown here with the depiction of the state of Alabama with the different gauges that they maintain. It's a simple matter of just clicking on it and drilling down to that gauge. Another example is this one, the Illinois River at Peoria, Illinois. We used this a lot during the spring floods and fall floods in 2011 on the Mississippi River. You can see the flood heights and the times that they will come. You have a crest, and also when the crest will pass your location. Another USGS product is their Flood Inundation Mapper system. Could be a real-time flood inundation mapping process. If your community has that, just give me the URL and I will go to that site to verify that you have met the credit criteria. As you drill down at this site, you can see the Kentucky River is depicted in Frankfort, Kentucky. It shows the date, time, depth of the flood gauge height recordings, which is part of the flood threat recognition system, which ties into your emergency warning dissemination. A coastal community may have a slosh-generated map, which is shown here on the Carteret County, North Carolina, a map that was submitted for their FTR recognition system correlation to maps and the adopted plan. SLOSH stands for Sea, Lake, and Overland Surges from Hurricanes. Their plan discussed the select evacuations of the various zones for Category 1 through 5 hurricanes, and this meets the basic credit criteria for the map and the plan correlation. A slosh-generated map may also be used as part of not only the FTR, but also the FRO and EWD, in this instance being the red band depicted on a stop sign in the red area of evacuation zone, so that the local citizens know when you're alerted to evacuate all red zones, or A zones, in this map. They'll know where they are but by just looking at their stop signs. So I've also seen some signs that have the letter in case the people are colorblind, so it works in both situations. The fourth credit criteria of the 6 is that a flood warning response plan must be adopted by the community, and I need to have the resolution or some such document saying that it has been adopted. This plan may have different names in different communities, such as Flood Warning Plan, Flood Preparedness Plan, or Flood Index or Emergency Operations Plan. This plan will describe the methods and warning devices used to disseminate your information to your public. This is created under EWD, and then tying back into the Flood Threat Recognition System, EWD, and flood response operations, it has to have specific actions taken at the different flood levels shown on your maps. If your plan is prepared at the county or parish level, or the borough level if you're in Alaska, it must be adopted by the individual communities that seek credit for it. Annexes, SOPs, and other documents do not require formal adoption by the governing body. If the county, borough, or parish plan lists the community by name, and it is acknowledged by community signature, then it is considered adopted. An example of a small community, this one having lakefront, Lake St. Croix Beach, Minnesota. The first map shows, as you can see on the bottom right, a small area of inundation, and that's depicted as at 684 feet. The second map of the same community shows a higher, larger area of inundation, and that's depicted at 692 feet. And the third map is showing the 696 feet area of flood inundation of their community. Then we go to their plan, which references the river elevation at 684 and the rise predicted, and that will be found on page 5 of the Emergency Operations Plan for St. Croix Beach. The plan goes into the staff titles such as Incident Commander, Setup Commander. It shows the various staff tasks that we look at in FRO, saying exactly what they do when the river elevation is at 684 feet, and this is continued on the next slide. As you can see here, the sandbag coordinator, the volunteer coordinator, pump coordinator, communications coordinator, I'm sure there could be more, but it's very short and succinct, saying exactly what they do at this river elevation. Going back to a coastal community such as Pinellas County, Florida, they had several different documents that they submitted for the FTR and their mapping. It all ties in together. As you can see here, they have their evacuation zones. As they drill down, you can see that they have building counts, population, facilities that correspond to those colors. Also, they have a hurricane evacuation implementation guide. That's part of their instructions in FRO for evacuees. That goes into the Pinellas Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan. All three of these products are one and the same, as that they address the flood threat recognition system and evacuation that is used in FRO. Then finally, they have the city within the county of City of Pinellas Park. They have a hurricane response plan that ties into the county plan. In the state of Florida, the counties are the administrators of emergency management. So if you're a community in there, you adopt that plan. If you have a separate plan, I can look at that for perhaps additional points. Credit criteria 5 of the 6. This community must implement the outreach projects. This will be covered by your ISO CRS representative. They'll actually evaluate this part or this aspect of the credit criteria for compliance with the overall activity. Outreach could be brochures, letters, newsletters. It could be part of your PPI or your Program for Public Information. That comes under Activity 330. For outreach, if you have at least 3 days of notification, such as coastal, it would be hurricanes, they may have to have repeated warnings, watches, safety information at least 72 hours in advance of that flooding. If your community has more than one source of flooding, such as riverine and coastal, you may have to use different approaches to reach your different audiences. In the 6th credit criteria of the basic 6, once again, we're talking about the exercise or evaluation of your plan, the after-action review or improvement plan. Emergency managers routinely produce these documents after each drill, exercise, or tabletop event. The Department of Homeland Security National Exercise Program is used to examine the preparedness and readiness of the nation. The program uses the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program, methodology, and related tools and resources. If the exercise took place at the county, borough, or parish level, the community must produce documentation of its participation in that exercise. This can be done with sign-in sheets or reports from programs such as Web EOC. Now let's talk about the methods of documentation. It would be wise for the community to look at the CRS Coordinator's Manual before you begin this collection of documents. This is to serve to understand what's actually being requested by the activity. It helps enhance your emergency manager's understanding of why he or she is doing this, and to provide a reasoning behind the extensive documentation checklist, which I've been told by many communities has actually helped improve their programs because there are some things they may have not have thought of or things they think is a better way of doing it. There is a web-based self-assessment tool that was developed for Activity 610, and you can go to the CRS resources page and download that tool. The latest documentation checklist is always available on this website, and we hope that you use that to complete your submission for Activity 610 credit. The checklist is a total of 14 pages, with the first 4 pages serving as a sales brochure, if you will, for the activity. It was designed to capture the interest of an emergency manager. The actual checklist begins on page 5. You should check the blocks, as you can see, 1 through 5, on what you are actually submitting for documentation verification. Below that are 2 blocks or sections, Emergency Manager, CRS Coordinator. That information should be completely filled out. And at the bottom, as you can see, highlighted in red as who completed the checklist. Hopefully it's the Emergency Manager. Page 6 is an optional section that you can really describe at length, and you can add more pages of what your community's flood warning program consists of. Sometimes you can't fit a round peg in a square hole. And we'll see how that actually can work into the credit criteria documentation requirements. Page 7 of the documentation checklist contains, in these two highlighted boxes, the top being the area impact adjustment map numbers, being the special flood hazard area, and under 1, how many structures are there. 2, the number of buildings that are covered by your FTR. 3 is the EWD, and 4 is the flood response operation buildings. Sometimes the numbers are different. That's part of the impact adjustment figures. The lower box contains 3 of the basic credit criteria, being the nature of the community's flood hazard. You can see on the top box, development exposed to flooding. You have your numbers of different buildings. And the third, the expected impacts on health and safety. Page 8, you can see 3 highlighted areas. I'm looking for the basic credit criteria, the first being the inundation map, showing at least 2 different flood areas for surge or 3 for riverine. The second box, the specific flood response actions tied to those flood areas. And the third, it must be adopted by the community. The plan that you're talking about all this, how it all correlates together, must be adopted. You give me a copy of the plan and the resolution of the adoption. And on page 9, skipping down to number 6, that's where you indicate the exercise or the activation documents, be the AAR, IP, or a lessons learned report, and the pages that shows if you are a community within a county, borough, parish that you participated. I've highlighted these red areas in this first few pages to show what I quickly look at when I receive a documentation checklist. If any of these are blank, it's a guaranteed 0 in your entire submission. On page 10, under Flood Threat Recognition System, this is where you indicate what level of system you have in your community, being 1, level 1, a manual system, level 2, automated flood alarm system, or level 3, flood warning system. Page 11 completes Flood Threat Recognition System. This is where you indicate if you have any community-owned systems such as alert, gauges. You can give us copies of the maintenance procedures for these. This may be available for any bonus points. Then we begin emergency warning dissemination at the bottom of the page. On page 12, I begin the process of showing you the sub-elements with the available points that you can achieve if you have the proper documentation. So you can look at number 4, EWD1 is worth 10 points. It explains out of the manual what is needed. You just simply indicate an attachment of where it's found in a plan and in the page. This is almost like a self-scoring system for you. EW 6 through 10 is depicted on page 13, and you continue with the same procedure as the previous page. Now we'll go to flood response operations. These start at the beginning of page 13. As you can see, there are bonus credit available under FRO 5 and 6, so that's something you should look at, and then give me the attachments and page numbers which references the required criteria. Continuing on page 14, under FRO 1 through 7, the same scenario identifies how many points is available in that sub-element, and then what's needed to verify the documentation required for that element. That's the same procedure. Show me the attachment of the plan, the name of the plan, and the page in which it is found. At the bottom of the page, we begin critical facilities planning. Critical facilities planning, shown on page 15, broken down into CFP 1 and 2, is worth a total of 75 points. We need the contact information, addresses, job titles, emails, things like that for the critical facilities. For 1, you have to have 1 to be eligible for 2. CFP 2 has to do with a percentage of how many of those critical facilities have their own flood warning and response plans that have been developed, received, and accepted by your community. At the bottom of the page is Storm Ready Community. This is verified by my going to the NWS website to see if you're listed by name. If your county's listed and you are not listed on the website, I can't give you credit by their procedures. However, if your county has received a letter from your local NWS office that lists your community by name, I can assign you the SRC points. Finally, I will discuss my scoring sheet that is sent to ISO. It follows Coordinator's Manual and Documentation Checklist format. So this is what they'll receive from me, and hopefully they will forward that on to you for your clarification. This is the first page of the community score sheet. As you can tell, it goes through the activity credit criteria as shown or depicted in the coordinator's manual. I take the numbers from your documentation checklist. As you can see, the numbers of the building special flood hazard area, and the number of structures that benefit from FTR, EWD, FRO, and you can see they're larger than the numbers found in the special flood hazard area itself. In subsection A, if there's a 0 or unknown indicated anywhere, you'll have an automatic 0 because you did not meet the basic credit criteria. Subsection B, flood threat recognition system, I'll put which points that you're credible for. If you do have a good system, but you don't have a map or adopted plan, I'll still indicate those points, but they'll be in red font with a parentheses around the number, and it will say 0 in FTR. Second page, the score sheet, going with EWD, FRO, and all the way down to CFP and SRC. This is a very good community. They maxed out in every sub-element. However, they were not SRC qualified through the NWS, so they have a 0. The TRC, that's non-applicable. Generally, that's for all riverine communities, or if you're a coastal community and you just don't have that program, it will have a NA. 613 is the impact adjustments that take the numbers provided from the first page, that being the structures in the special flood hazard area, and the number of structures that benefit from FTR, EWD, and FRO. This equates in this instance to an impact adjustment of 1.0. You'll probably wonder why is there a 0 at the 610 at the bottom right. You remember they didn't have an exercise or documentation of an activation within the past 12 months. The next page is comments. This is where I discuss what points you received by sub-element, and if I have any other comments, such as in the third paragraph, documentation was not submitted for the city's participation in a flood-related exercise. That's where I really tell you there what you're missing. Also, you can just go through the sub-elements and see what you're awarded for, and if there's anything else that you do need to submit, such as under EWD, the annual testing of warning equipment. You must verify this equipment was tested. That can be done with a sheet saying the siren systems are good, they were tested on this date. Your telephone, reverse 911, whatever was used, this is how many people you called. That's a simple report that will be spit out by that program. Also, if you have like the Code Red or Everbridge, it's a report that can be generated quite easily. In this page, I will show the documentation you submitted to me for verification. I'll list them. I'll also have any previous documentation reviewed. In this case, it was done in 2011 with a possible of 130 points. On this evaluation, this community would receive 0 points because they did not have documentation of an exercise. The final 2 pages of the community score sheet are for the ISO CRS specialist use only. This is a fill in the blank on the PDF. So if you are missing verification of EWD equipment, they can confirm that there. Same with CFP. Any type of things that were missing in my overall evaluation that they can verify, they indicate it here. In summary, I've briefly explained the activity's credit criteria as shown in the CRS Coordinator's Manual. I've given you examples of changes which will be implemented in the 2017 manual. I've also shown you methods of documentation using the documentation checklist and a sample of a score sheet that I send to the ISO specialist and which you will also get. We can use those score sheets in any email correspondence or even a conference call. For more information on Activity 610, please go to crsresources.org.